kumara is a sweet potato, but it doesn't walk around saying, hey, look at me, I'm a sweet potato. People eat it and go, wow, that's a sweet potato. So the kumara is a bit like culture. We don't talk about culture. If we're going to maintain any sort of dignity out of this game, we've got to understand who we are. Another thing that happens with young coaches, or especially young players, they think rugby defines them. You know, your belief doesn't get weaker. You just get more options. He just came up to me and said, mate, I just need to give you a little stab in the belly. And that was, to me, wow, that's pretty powerful. Because
welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring. I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Mick Byrne. Now, Mick Byrne is a name synonymous with high-performance rugby and is currently the head coach of the Flying Fijians, the Fijian national team. Mick has been a professional rugby coach for 25 years and coached 6 international teams, including a decade with the All Blacks, winning 2 World Cups and pretty much every other trophy on offer. Previous to that, he has coached Pro AFL for a decade, and that's Aussie rules for you that don't live in Australia. Previous to that, he was also a Pro AFL player himself with over 167 games to his name. Mick's experience is extremely high and extremely vast, and there's no better person to talk to about the nuances of culture than someone that's seen a lot of it. Mick Byrne, Bulavanaka.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me, mate. I've been following your podcasts and some really great comments, and I can see that you're making a difference, mate. So well done.
Thank you, mate. Well, it's such a pleasure to have people like yourself with so much experience like yourself just sharing everything you got and putting your hand up and saying, yeah, let's do this. And I think that's the real joy of this sport and the people within it. It's just such a community of sharing.
Yeah, I think I don't like talking about Michael Schumacher too much because of the tragedy, but I remember listening to him being interviewed one day, and a journo said to him, when he was racing, he said to him, do you think you're winning all the races because you've got the best car? And he threw him the keys and said, well, you go and do it. And I just remember that sort of thing was, well, this is my stuff and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I don't mind sharing it because it's my stuff, and good luck if you want to go and use it, you know. And then if you're using it, I've got to get better anyway. I'm getting better. I'm always developing. So I've never been anyone to hide away from sharing what I'm doing, you know. And I think it's important that, you know, as a coach, if you share what you do, it sort of also challenges you. Is there another way? Is there a better way of doing it? And so, you know, I've always been somebody who's, you know, shared what I do and don't care who really takes it, you know.
Yeah, I love it. And you do have a lot of stuff to share. It's almost like that teaching analogy, like all teachers teach from the same textbook, but we all know there's a big range of teachers out there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's good point.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating. And it's a testament to yourself and all coaches of your experience. Now, Mick, the first question I love to ask is, how do you define culture?
Yeah, it's a word it's been thrown up all the time. And I think culture is just, for me, it's values, standards and beliefs. You know, like if you've got your values and standards right and you get the belief right, then you know, it just sort of, your culture comes up. I don't use the word culture in our program. It's actually goes back to in the All Black. I remember Tamati Ellison and Liam Messon doing a skit on club night one night. And we used to have some really good, you know, Tuesday night before we go out for dinner, we used to have club night and everyone would do something. And this night, Tamati and Liam walked in as a couple of Māori elders. And, you know, they came into the room and, mate, it was just one of the funniest experiences of all time. But they talked about a fable, about the old Māori fable about the kumara. And, you know, the thing is, like, the kumara is a sweet potato, but it doesn't walk around saying, hey, look at me, I'm a sweet potato. People eat it and go, wow, that's a sweet potato. So the kumara is a bit like culture. We don't talk about culture, but we leave a hotel, like the recent PNC, we leave the hotel and the manager comes to our manager and goes, geez, the culture of your players is enormous. So we sort of say, let's live our values, standards and our beliefs And whatever that is, that's who we are. And we don't try and achieve a culture, because culture changes. You can bring in just one experienced senior player that has credibility in the way he plays rugby, but not a great leader or a great person, and suddenly your whole cultural environment can change. The way you maintain what you would deem as a culture, if you like, is by sticking to your values and standards of beliefs, and not swaying from that. So for me, that's how I sort of look at it. I say, well, there was always this, let's have a cultural meeting and let's do a workshop so we set our culture right and get our culture right. And then you recruit a player mid-year and your culture changes. So it's around whoever comes into your environment, they need to buy into your values, standards and beliefs. And if they do that, then whatever's left over and how you operate, then other people will look in that and probably say, well, they've got a good, strong culture there. That I'm sort of playing on words with you here, Ben, but
I love it.
we don't use the word culture. We just say, let's live our values and our standards and work through our beliefs.
Yeah. And just on that, I think when you're saying culture changes, is a big part of the leaders or the coaches particularly is to ensure that we're not changing willy-nilly. That we're actually got a vision and a target and we're staying on track. Is that the biggest job of the coach?
Yeah, I think for me at the moment, it's probably my biggest, because I've got some great coaches. I'm just blessed to have Aaron Major in the role. I mean, a previous head coach and a very good head coach. And he comes in and he can manage the coaches and manage our program, and he's awesome and he can do his job, so it's not distracting from him. And then you got Graham Jews, who's he's a developing forwards coach, and he's at the Chiefs now full time, which is awesome. Jeremiah Bai is an extraordinary player that's just started his coaching career, and he's growing all the time. And for me, Rwanga was a lock for the 2007 World Cup team, and he's been coaching here on Ireland. And we're bringing him in now to create some, the development around his coaching, but also in our contact area and assisting in the forwards and stuff. The coaching group functions basically without me on the field. But I'm there, and I have aspects of the game that I keep an eye on. But the big one for me is maintaining what we set out to do. Every morning, our values and standards and beliefs are up on the screen. We review our game around them. We review our lifestyle around them. We do Lotu around them. So every day, we are talking about our values and standards and beliefs. And that's the job. We set it up, and the same in businesses and other people. They go away and they go on this retreat at the beginning of the year, and they set their mission statement and they set out their plans. And they get a nice little booklet, and it sits in the bottom drawer, and the next time they pull it out is when they go on the retreat next year to revisit their mission statement. I just found over the time I've been in environments that have been like that. And I just like, well, if we actually live the words that we set out to do, we'd actually be pretty good. But what we know is it's really tough, and so in the words that we have a lot of faith in the island, a lot of faith in the team. And so a couple of Bible verses that sit really strong with us, James 1:22-25 talks about doing what you say. Don't be a hearer. Don't just be a hearer, be a doer. And so I think that's probably one of the big secrets of success is to do what you say. So when we do our values and standards and beliefs and we put them up on the wall, or, in any environment, I've been in so many different environments where you see their values and standards on the wall, then you go and watch training and they're not living, they don't live it. So for me, if we're going to spend the time and ask people to buy into something, we as the leaders being, the couple of us, the coaches and the players, the leading players, we have to live it every day. So that's how it works.
Yeah. So that reinforcement every day, do what you say. And as a leader, you're the first example of that, everything you do. Like you're being watched, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to keep continually living it. And I was going to say reinforce it, but that's just another thing that is a word, like you got to live it every day, and there's a lot of coaches will reinforce their values or reinforce the words, but, you got to actually live it. That's the challenge. And we talk about, what does that look like? So yeah, when we're on and off the field, that's a challenge, and there's no question. But as long as you've got some sort of values and standards that are guiding you, you should be okay.
Yeah. Well, just on that, mate, you're in a pretty unique place now in Fiji where the culture is, in general, the Fijian culture is an amazing one as it is. And I've got a quote from you here, which you said, Fijian culture has grown me as a person. It's humbled me, actually. And why is that? Why is you're not Fijian going into a Fijian culture? How has that culture taken hold of you? And what do you mean by it's humbled you?
Well, I think, look, I've got a little village that I've become part of, Sikituru, a little village there, and they look after me. And, we were, I guess working class, my dad had 3 jobs, there was 5 kids, and we all struggled, and, my clothes ended up being my brother's clothes, and my bike ended up being my brother's bike, and all that sort of stuff. And we thought we were hard done by when you sort of get to other, you see other schools and you see other kids and they got the brand new bike and all that sort of stuff, and then you sort of come here and you sort of go out into the village and don't have anything, they're just getting on with life, and you sort of realize, what, I've had a blessed life, I was I've a really fortunate life, and I had love in my household, so, my father and my mother just loved us unconditionally, so having had that, and then you come here and you see how people just get on, and I think one of the things where I talk about it humbling me was in the first year on island. I lived in an apartment block before I moved in here, and we had like a security guy at the front, and every morning he's waving, and every morning he's happy, and just sits in a little box every day, and he's happy as all day long. And I come back and we got our asses kicked by the Hurricanes, in Melbourne, and in Wellington. And I drive back into the drive after coming back from the airport, and I park my car. Coach, great game. The boys were great. And I'm like, wow, like I was expecting, if I did that in Australia, I'd be like, get another job, coach, get someone else, they'd be like. And he was just like, no, the boys were great. We love it. We love them, and I was like, wow. And I just walked off and I thought, these guys are actually, they genuinely just love the game, and they see the game for what it is. It's a game played by people trying really hard that sometimes it doesn't work, but we still love you,
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is quite a humbling experience. So, and the other one I think for me was when we beat the Crusaders the first time. In Fiji, and I went to the press conference and they asked me, how do you feel? And I said, I'm going to use a word I've never used in professional sport. I said, it's joyous. Like I never thought I'd ever talk about rugby or violent sport being joyous, but the joy that was in the crowd was just, it was unbelievable, and it was mind-blowing. And sort of then you think, this is the game. Like you get caught up with losing a game, or you get caught up with a mistake on the field, which I've always, this is one of my dark traits is, trying to be perfect at different things, and when things don't go well, you're like, what's going on, but then now it's like, okay, it's just a game. People are going to make mistakes, so it's sort of, that's how you learn. That's how I've learned, just you still get edgy. You still get, don't get me wrong, I still get edgy, I still get wound up, before a game, the heart's racing and all that sort of stuff. But just the fact that the people here, they show you that, to enjoy the moments of the game,
And I love it. There's a lot of, like I'd say, mate, a lot of coaches, that's almost like a curse, trying to be perfect, get everything right, get the perfect game, which is not the reality. It's cool to hear that the environment you're in is actually helping, is a reminder to you that it is just a game, and to not get so wound up and into it. And you might know this quote. I remember Steve Hansen talks a lot about this, is about, we love you before you go out to play, and we love you when you get back. And that's right. Certainly very rich in Fijian culture, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely is. They, everybody, you don't actually have to say that here. That's just, it's the behaviour,
That's right.
It goes
The
unsaid.
Kumara doesn't have to say he's a sweet potato.
No, exactly, mate. It happens, and that's exactly, and you live it every day. People know that as long as you're respectful but yeah, I think it's, the people here, they certainly live that.
Well, mate, when you talked about that word joyous and you mentioned it in a commentary review where the Fijian team and the opposition were singing together on the field in beautiful melody, and you said, this is just joyous, like the culture in this place where two rival teams can come together in a big circle, join up and sing in beautiful harmony, like that only Polynesian cultures can, around a battle that they're going into, a physical battle. And it's just a reminder, isn't it, about that there's bigger things.
That was this year when we played Samoa in Rotorua.
The heart of the Maori?
Yeah, exactly. It was awesome. We went to Marae and we got the history of the Māori, and they presented their puffery to us, and it was unbelievable. That started our week, and then we finished bashing the crap out of each other. Well, not me, but the players. Bashing the crap out of each other, and then arms around singing. But the crowd was unbelievable. Like, the blue flags of Fiji and the blue flags of Samoa were in the stand. It was like a concert. It was like a concert that was going on out on the ground. And I remember saying after the game, this is what rugby should be all about. There was nobody yelling abuse at the players. There was no one yelling abuse at the referee. In fact, they were laughing at errors of their own team. They chart-hoo on an error of their own team. But it's just they sing and they enjoy, and Samoa were enjoying Fiji's playing, and the Fiji crowd were enjoying Samoa playing. And you finish the game and you look over and, there's 30 guys, 46 guys or 50 guys with the reserves, arm around each other, singing hymn, celebrating the day. And I was like, this is what rugby's about. You can go to all those professional environments overseas and get abused by your fans after you walk off the ground and all that sort of stuff if you like. But this is the pure heart of rugby when you see that stuff.
Yeah, and it must be fascinating coming in as a non-Fijian and like with all your experience, and you have a certain way of doing things. Then you see this way, and it's completely off what you've known before, and sort of epitomizes and reinforces that there's no right way to this stuff. There's just your way, the way you do it, the way that your environment, your people, your history, your traditions are done. It's your way, and any way can work. There's not just a cut and paste. You do it like this because the All Blacks do it like this, or the Crusaders do it like that. There's no cut and paste, is there? It's you gotta understand what your background is, your experience and your history and those sort of things, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a debate around different times when you do coaching courses, and it's like, you want to impose your will on a team and things like that. And that's right, but I think there's an element of first understanding where your team's at. If you can understand where your team's at and what's needed, then you can take it on board. And I think probably when I started with the Drua, I didn't have enough understanding about where these guys had come from. Because people had told me, oh, they're this and they're that, and the staff they've been to Olympics and I was sort of, made the assumption that we were far further down the track of professionalism than we actually were. So I got really frustrated in those first few months at the Drua, and, it wasn't, and my dark traits, which I call my dark traits, they were starting to come to the fore, and those, you sort of identify, you come home and you're like, yeah, that wasn't good. I didn't behave well today, so.
Well, what are those dark traits, Mick? What are some of those more examples of those?
Sarcasm's up there at the highest point, and I try and work on that. And the other one is, closing off, just shutting things down and not engaging. So, and that puts pressure on people around you because they can see that something's going wrong, So, a couple of dark traits there, and identifying those. You get home and but then you get up the next day and there's still more shit going on. So, it was really, I had to really, and I was lucky enough. I had a couple of good men around me, Jacko being one, and another guy, Marty Hume, that would just come and have a coffee with me, and say, listen, shape up. So it was good, and then you realise, yep, okay, and then you go back to what you probably should have done at the start, and instead of making an assumption because people have been to the Olympics, players and staff and different things that actually know what you're trying to get and know what they need to be doing. So I think that was a big learning for me, so, and I've had a couple of moments like that. You'd think you'd learn after a while, but the pressure of performance gets you. I remember when I was in Scotland, Tony Gilbert was at the Borders. I was sort of venting with him one day about the frustrations I was having, and he took me up to the William Wallace Monument in Melrose there, and we looked down over the valleys, and he explained to me what this part of the world, in the history is, the English coming up and coming through here and destroying people's place and women and all that sort of stuff, and then the Scots, the Highlanders winning the battle and coming back down through here. So this place was basically the hub of enemies. There were foreigners coming in all the time, and you need to earn their respect before you can just come in and start doing stuff. And that was a good learning for me, So sit back, and earn a bit, and rather than be headstrong and just get on with stuff, because I think you were talking about it before, just there's a way, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do. There's a way I'm going to get things done. So I think they're the learnings. And then, but under pressure, you got to be really careful because everyone's got some dark traits, and and under pressure, real pressure, they come to the fore. And if you can identify them, you can manage them as best you can. So I think they're the learnings as you go through.
What would you, mate? I think it's a really important point, because identifying your own dark traits, because everyone has them, particularly in coaching. There's a lovely quote which says, "Coaches are all good people, just assholes under pressure." And I've heard that said, and it's probably quite true. And as much as you don't want to be, that pressure of performance does get you. What would be some of your advice to coaches coming through that just got that sinking suspicion they're acting in a way which they're not entirely pumped with? How do you sit back and analyze that stuff, that sarcasm, that closing off, those kind of things that you identified about yourself? A, how do you identify them? And B, how do you go about improving on them or listening them?
I think the first one is identifying them, and like having honest conversations with people that you trust, but also accepting that these things, not justifying it. I think, like you're under pressure and someone says, you cut that guy off before he finished speaking. Yeah, mate, but we just got to get on with it, justifying why you do stuff and owning it, So there's a lot of times when you're, especially a young coach, and you're really strong in your belief that you try and justify some of the things you're doing instead of listening to what's being said and maybe trying to understand. A couple of things I do is if I'm having a meeting with somebody, I'll sit in their chair and I'll have a look at what their view is, and I'll just sit in their chair and have a look around the room. What are they going to look at? And I see there's a bit of crap over there, or there's something over there, and I'll just try and make where they sit as comfortable, and then I understand where they might be coming from when they come into that room. They're coming in to talk to me about selection. So I'm not here to justify why I didn't pick you. I'm here to find out what you're thinking. So I sit in their chair, and I think, right, he's coming in to see me. When he sits in this chair, what do I think he might say? And that helps me prepare for that. And then when I come in, I'll let them talk, and that way helps me, rather than starting the conversation with, look, mate, you need to work a little bit harder off the ball. I think your tackle tech can improve. And, last week you sort of, this and this. Yeah, well, he's probably done his review, but I got to find out what he's feeling, So, it's just sort of sit there and think, what is this guy, when he comes to see, he wants to come and see me, or I'm called him in, understand where he's coming from. And then you can still be, I've had some really honest and brutal conversations with players, and when they've left the room, they've hugged up and they've left the room, and he's like, yeah, I get it. I'm on board, coach, but because there is some things you got to have serious conversations about. It's not about being warm and fuzzy. People that are in the wrong and have done the wrong thing need to hear it. Otherwise, and this is a big challenge. It's a bit like being a parent. You're a parent first and you're a friend second. But if you're a great parent, if you end up being a great parent, you end up being a great friend. So as a coach, you need to be a coach first. And so at the end of a career, a player will come back and they'll go, oh, he was a great bloke, but shit, you could get away with stuff. Like that. That's not the idea of a coach. You can be a great coach and still be a good friend, and still be friend, like you don't have to be a great coach and have friends. But if you go out to be friends and try and be this sort of friend and keep everyone happy, you end up not being a good coach. And I think and it's the same as a parent, like if you're a really good parent and you go through some shit years, especially when your kids are like 14 to 20, but if you're a really good parent, when you get out the other side of it, they'll like say, I'm glad we did what we did, sort of thing. And they're tight with you. And I think they're the challenges that you can have when when you raise your kids from birth and you go through those first 10, 12 years. There's enough love built up there to handle 14-year-old telling you that they hate you, So you don't have to try and get them to like you as much. I look at it like that, as a coach. At the end of the day, if I'm a great coach, the players will respect and, they'll like you because you've been a good coach.
Mate, gee, there's some absolute nuggets in there, Mick. I love how you talked about sitting in someone else's chair, both physically and metaphorically to begin with. I think that's quite powerful, actually, just in the chair, seeing the way they see the world from a physical standpoint. But I'm even more enjoying, mate, that parent first concept, friend second, because that parenting is coaching in a lot of way. And yeah. I've actually had conversations with Dad around, he said to me, at times, there's a lot of tough love there in your youth, but the tough love was because there was love underpinning it. Yeah. And that was really powerful. And then later in life, I'm a better friend with Dad now than I ever was because he's gone back and said to me, like, the reason I did this, this, and this was for these reasons. And you may not have agreed with or been able to see it at the time. But now, being a lot older with kids of my own, I can understand, I go, actually, fair play, that was bang on. A lot of respect that he didn't try to be a friend. And same with a coach. Because I think, Mick, that's the other one about coaching, isn't it, around this sort of stuff is when you're talking about culture, a lot of people think it's a soft thing, right? Like that, but it's not soft, is it? Like it's
honest.
It's honest, and honestly can can be done in a whole lot of different ways, right?
Yeah,
have you struggled with that?
You don't have to be abusive. You don't have to be abusive. I think it's a couple of things when you were talking that sort of help the conversations, and one of them is getting rid of the word "don't" out of your vocabulary, because it's a protection element as a parent. Don't touch the fire, don't touch the boiling pot. But the doing words are what kids and players listen to. So if I say don't touch the pot, they're hearing touch the pot. So they're hearing the doing word is touch. It's like if you're doing tackle technique, if you say to a player, don't plant your feet, the doing word is plant the feet. So in their head, they're seeing plant the feet. So it's a tough conversation to have where you're trying to help people get better and take the word don't out of it so that you're giving them the answers. You're always giving them what you're looking for. So you're saying, keep your feet moving through contact, or, wrap your arms, rather than just don't lead with your shoulder, because the picture is lead with your shoulder. So when you're having these tough conversations, as long as you're asking questions and giving solutions to the answers, then you can have a good, honest conversation. And it's not easy and it's not warm and fuzzy and you don't get it right all the time. But it's having them, I think, is the tough one. And I've got better at that over the years. I'm still, it's still one of those things that you got to turn up to. The hardest thing in the job is selections, and there's a few guys we're going to chat to over the next week around all that haven't made our squad, but you just got to, be upfront and honest and go through that process.
Yeah, you don't always get them right straight away is the first word we just talked about not using.
Yeah.
But it's important that you actually have the conversation rather than avoid it, right? Like an experiment, and you don't always get them right, but have them, be upfront, be honest, and correct later. That's what you'd want your players to be doing. Have a crack and then modify as you go. And it's the same with coaching, isn't it? Like the conversation part, especially around selection, is the hardest one. And I know a lot of coaches struggle with that, but have it. Just be brave enough to have it and be open and honest. And then as you go, as you get more experienced, they'll get better and easier to a degree, right?
Yeah. And you've got to make sure that you understand where the players are coming from. Some are going to get angry. Some are not going to see what you're seeing. So you need to accept that as part of the process. And if somebody walks away and they're really angry and they're upset with you, then, you got to see that as, well, firstly, it means something to them. But secondly, there's a couple of answers that they're looking for, So, and that's part of the, building what we talked about right at the start, our values and standards and our beliefs.
I love the way you just flipped the tone of that, Mac, where you said people get angry, and probably as a new coach, like you can just get absorbed in that emotion, where you just went a little bit deeper and you said that anger is actually showing that they care. Like there's a deeper part to it. If you just get caught up as a coach on that interaction and the anger and that emotion at the front, you miss the deeper stuff, right? Which is they care, they want to play, they want to be selected, they want to get better. And this anger is just how they're expressing it right now because they're at this level of maturity. And if you can teach them to how to present that better, they're going to be a better person, be able to present it better, and ultimately get to where they want to go.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think emotion is the greatest distraction in a conversation.
Emotion is the greatest distraction of the conversation.
Yeah. So it takes you to places you don't want to go sometimes. You and I are going to talk about the fruit salad, and then you get upset and you start getting angry, and you get, well, mate, every time we chat, there's always something. And I'm like, well, what about it, mate? Like, what are you talking about? And well, there's always this or and the fruit salad's still sitting on the table, not getting looked at. But our conversation now is around all this emotional crap that's going on. So you've got to be able to bring them back to the fruit salad. It's just an analogy, whatever it is. It could be, a behaviour that you're not happy with, the player goes, well, you're always at me about something. And I'm like, well, and if I get caught up in that emotion, then I can be starting to have discussions, and it happens in any relationship. It can happen with the wife at home, the children at home. The conversation starts off about a fact. And before you know it, emotion has taken you somewhere else. And now you're in an emotional argument or another discussion about something else. So emotion is the greatest distraction from the conversation. It'll take you to some place that you don't want to be and you never intended being. So you've got to be able to accept that emotion's right, but find a way back to where we started. And if you can't, then just finish the conversation. So look, let's leave it at that now. Think about that. Maybe, tomorrow we'll come back and we'll have another go at it, But rather than getting caught up chasing this emotional roller coaster. I think as a young player, as a player, I was poor at it, and as a young coach, I was poor at it. So
you got too emotional.
I got caught up in the emotion of it. It's an emotional game. It's an emotional game. You carry a lot of motivation, you carry a lot of attitude, you carry a lot of aggression to play the game, and we can build it up pretty quickly. We can go from 0 to 100 better than a German Shepherd. We've got to be careful, when we're in those environments that we maintain an ability to, well, this is not where we need to be. Whereas when I was young, I was into it. Like, if we want to go down this road, let's go down this road.
Yeah,
It doesn't help, and you finish up the conversation and sometimes it's damaged, and you don't want to be there. I know when I was a young coach and as a player, I made errors in those things, where you just want to either win the discussion, win the argument, or you're right, I'm wrong, whatever it is. But whatever we set out to do, that's why sitting in a chair, what do we want to get from this conversation? A little bit of prep on the conversation helps. because we don't want to. I don't want to get distracted away from helping the player get better in whatever it is we're trying to do.
I love it. I love it. I think it's really awesome you're talking about the young coaches and your younger self. And you said something a little bit earlier. You said younger coaches are generally stronger in their beliefs. And you just mentioned there that they get caught up in the emotion a lot more. And as you age, do you think your beliefs, you realise, aren't as fixed as they were at the start? What is about a young coach that you get this is the way?
I think there's certain things that work for you as a player. There's certain attitudes that work for you as a player that, you have to go out there and you were going to get belted, and it was a physical game. And, there were certain things that you did as a player that you prepared for. And, but as a coach, you're not coaching players with your attitude. You're coaching players with a lot of different attitudes, and sometimes as a coach, you've got a player that you were never, And as I say, sometimes you got to, literally, not literally, but, like punch a player on the nose, or you got to put your arm around it. And if you know how to approach a player, but sometimes as a young coach, you have a way of doing something, and you learn very quickly that your way with that player doesn't work, but then your way with that player works. And all of a sudden you start to gravitate towards that guy. He's a good guy. He gets it. He's tough. This guy over here, he actually could be just as good, but your belief in the way it should get done doesn't resonate with him, and he sort of doesn't buy into it. So as a coach, I wouldn't say you're a chameleon, but you have to be able to shift your dynamic across that way. So as a young coach, you have a set of standards or beliefs that you need, and what you need to do is you need to grow those, and your belief comes from, as you grow older, your actually beliefs come stronger, but they're not fixed. They're not road. Your belief becomes strong in that I can take that road, or that road, and my belief is I'll get there. If I take that road, I'll still get to where I need to get to. So your belief doesn't get weaker. You just get more options, and you grow your understanding, and your belief in your own ability to get things done is strong because you've got more options.
Mate, I love it. Younger coaches are generally more fixed in their beliefs. As you get older, you get stronger, but not as fixed. There's different ways of getting there.
Yeah.
Mate, that's powerful, mate. I love that chameleon phrase too. It's a coach's big skill set is to be able to shift your dynamic, because you're not just coaching you're coaching a gazillion variations.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, when I played, and this is something that I struggle with as a young coach, when I played, my coach told me something, it was the gospel. I just get it, and if he said because I put my hand up, I made errors, the coach was great. I mean, Alan Jeans was an awesome coach at Hawthorn. He was unbelievable. He'd call you into his room, and you had to walk into the building, you had to walk down a corridor and into the change room, and his office was halfway down the corridor. And you'd sort of walk along, and you didn't want to, when you'd played a bad game on the Saturday and you knew you weren't great, you sort of kept your eyes straight ahead towards the change room. You didn't want to sort of look into the coach's room. And you'd be you get about 3 or 4 metres past his room and you'd hear, Nara, because that was my nickname. You'd hear, Nara. And you're like, shit, here we go. And then you go back into his room, But having that sort of conversation and having that understanding, it was always, I just accepted what no, you should have done this. This is not right. That's not right. That was good. But I never questioned him. I never questioned him from a point of view of, what about this? Or why'd you bring me off? Or I just, I trusted and that was me. But when I started coaching, I'm getting phone calls, 10 phone calls a night from different players, why aren't I getting a look at this? Or why aren't you, And I'm like, wow, there's a whole difference, and I was just wondering what players I played with used to ring the coach. Maybe that was a fault of mine as a player. Maybe I should have been more inquisitive as a player. But my behaviour as a player dictated my early, players are, ringing me up, like, why'd you bring me off the ground? And I'm like, as a young coach.
Because I said.
Because I wanted to, because I never questioned the coaches when I played. And maybe that was a fault of mine as a player, and it carried into my early coaching. And then you realise, hang on, and as we talked about now, all those learnings, actually I sit in the chair now, these guys have got a point. They've got something, there's something that's missing in the communication I've had with them, and we need to clear it up. So, yeah, it was just one of those things as a young coach, you learn.
That's the joy of coaching, isn't it? There's just so much, and it never ends. Like, you're never going to be able to nail every personality type, and there's always one aspect.
Get it all right, that's for sure.
That's right. We did a wonderful thing, man. I'll just raise it now because we're on this topic. But one year, for exactly this reason, we did, you do those personality tests that you do and you get a colour or a dot or whatever. There's lots of versions of that. But we had a point where we as coaches did it as well. And we had a diverse coaching group. And we then divided up and picked as well. So not just which group of players do you match? And then you're the check-in point for those. Nothing official, but here's your 7 players which are similar to you, mindset-wise, character-wise. They're your responsibility for the year, just to check in, because there's a link there for you which you resonate or you understand their way of thinking because it's you. And that was a really powerful thing for us as a group, because we had a lot of difficult guys, but a lot of those difficult guys are actually very similar to one of our coaches. So I, as the head coach, would just say to, hey, mate, what's going on with that guy, you reckon? And he'd go, I reckon it's this, because this is what I would have been thinking in that situation. And it was a lovely insight. I think it was a really good use of sort of those tools from a coaching, not just a playing perspective.
Yeah, well, I think they're good. There's a whole range of different ones. But I think, being aware of that, and that's something that, you never get right. And sometimes you get really busy getting on and, some of those little things get left behind, and you always got to revisit it, I think it's a really good point.
Yeah. So, mate, when we're talking to you've obviously, you're off Fiji now, but you've had a huge range of experiences across your career, not just in rugby, but you've been a pro AFL, Aussie rules, player and coach for a long time. And you've been across the world, mate, like literally across the world in professional sporting settings. Is there any that stand out to you as teams that did their environments, their cultures really well? And there are others that you're like, what have you taken away? And what would you leave behind from some of those experiences?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the All Black environment was great, it was huge. But there was a lot of growth in there as well,
Yes.
We talked to Aaron. I talked to Aaron Major, a little bit about what it was like back in those early days, and he's got a good insight from the player perspective and also now, growing into a coaching perspective and where the behaviours were there in those early days and then making some changes along the way. And I think the growth of that, with guys like Gilbert, Smithy, Steve was awesome because he's got a massive EQ, and Graham leading the program. At those times leading up to 211, there was some real good growth. And then when Steve took over in 212, the growth of focusing on us became even more important, so the inward growth, rather than looking at how do we beat this opposition, is how do we not beat ourselves, but how do we achieve what we set out to achieve. Never ever disrespecting the opposition, but understanding what we're chasing is our best performance, and how do we do that? And so you could have a win, and on your Monday, I remember, a couple of boys used to joke, you'd see around lunchtime, they'd joke and they'd go, shit, what would have happened if we'd lost? Because the meeting was not abusive, never abusive, but it was honest. It was hard hitting. Didn't get this right. We didn't get this right. We can be better here, but we won, and I think that was, trying to maintain something like that. And I guess when you're the number one team in the world, and I think they were, I think we were number one for over 100 weeks or something at one stage. So when you're the number one team in the world, it's easy to have those sort of things. I guess people are going to say, yeah, it's easy when you're winning every game not to worry about winning. But, we did win every game in 212, but we didn't win every game after that. And going into the World Cup in 2015, except for a neck roll. I think it might have been on Owen Franks with 10 minutes to go. South Africa looked like they were going to win that game. We got a reversal from a South African penalty, which would have put them in front. We got a reversal and they came back and gave us a penalty for a neck roll. So we were, one TMO decision away from probably getting beaten in the semi-final. So, but your belief in yourself and your belief in your team, is there, because all you've been practicing for 4 years is you getting yourself right, getting your performance right. And so even though you might not be winning, it's still important to maintain that. I work to maintain that, even though you might not be winning games. Stay really focused on your performance and not get caught up in, well, we just lost, and so we got to, we're going to change our week. This week was going to be a light week, but we lost, so now we're going to smash it. You can't just staying the course based around your performance. I think they're really strong cultures that I got out of that environment. Yeah, I think you talk about the positives. I think that was probably the big one of sitting in that environment from 2005 to 2015 and seeing the evolution of leadership, the evolution of coaching, the evolution of, and we all grew as people in that environment. So pretty powerful, powerful year.
How did you go, Mick? Because I know, talking to Steve, he talked about his biggest growth it wasn't so much about the X's and O's of the game, but this leadership and cultural side he got better at. And he is a big EQ guy, but he said that's the area where he thinks he's got better as a leader. What about yourself? Did like in that role you started off as skills and kicking stuff? Have you grown on the other side of stuff, the culture side and the leadership side? Is that grown in you? Is that what you came through with?
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough, Steve and I got a pretty good affinity. We're like-minded, we're good mates. And, he was my my coffee buddy, my guy that just go, I think we need to have a coffee. He'd come over to me, hey son, I think we need to go and have a coffee. And you're like, okay, this is going to be good. And it was good, and we'd be the same. So, we called them critical friends. I've got a critical friend. And, during that environment, if you've got somebody that you can be your critical friend, then you can go and have those sort of hard-hitting conversations. So, he'd be like, come up and you just say, oh, fun, let's just go and get a coffee. And, so you're like, okay, that's good. And then it's likewise, there'd be other conversations back the other way, So I think it's important in that way. Then I think for those conversations, you sort of grow as a person if you're having them. And I think they're more important than an end-of-year review. I'm not against, when I say I'm not against end-of-year reviews, I think there has to be some sort of feedback, but it's more around the program. How can the program get better rather than getting into individual people? And I think the individual review should be done weekly, daily, whenever you're together. You should be able to have a review process that is constant during the week, so that you've got an environment where people can sit down, have a coffee and have a chat and say, listen, I didn't really like the way you spoke to me today. I thought you're a little bit short. And, if we can have those conversations during the day, rather than sort of getting to the end of the year and filling in a multiple choice question around, do you feel valued or those types of things. Let's have the conversations when they happen and when you talk about real things, and you can put them to bed and grow from it.
And I think that's a lovely phrase for coaches, Mick. Have a critical friend. And that's just a lovely concept, and saving, instead of waiting all the way to the end and then doing an overview, doing it constantly, like throughout, like it's just living it every day or every week. But I think it's a cool concept too. You talk about, because I know Steve still does this, is right, mate, about time we had a coffee. And like that, what I always loved about that phrasing, so instead of saying, I need to have a chat to you about your performance on the field today, the softening nature of something like that, like, let's go have a coffee. You know what's coming, but it's just softening down how you do it. And there's another one which I think is really valuable, is let's go for a little walk. These little things are great little tricks for coaches. Well, not tricks, they're good for human things as well. It makes it easier to be honest, right? Like when you're sitting down having a coffee with someone, it makes everything that comes more natural, more honest, and it's a more neutral ground, isn't it? Like, as a coach, if you say, come into my office and sit over there, man, you're going to have your defenses up. But when you're going out on a neutral ground, it's different, isn't it?
But yeah, and I think you knew, but the concept of it was you knew something was coming, right? So already, if you're a positive person, you don't put your guard up. You're sort of ready for it, because you got it's a critical friend. It's not a random guy just turns around and wants to have a go at you. And I remember back in 2002 when I first met, actually the second time, first time I met Toddy Blackadder, and I think with Steve and all those guys, it was obviously a Crusader thing, but they had a saying, stab in the belly. And I remember Toddy was, like you could sort of come up to someone and say, mate, I just need to give you a little stab in the belly, which is a positive way of being, a critical friend rather than stabbing you in the back, And I remember, I've never forgotten the conversation. It was out in the backfield on Murrayfield, and, Toddy came up and goes, mate, just going to give you a little stab in the belly. Because when I was in Scotland, I was pretty fired up about how they were doing things, and I was trying to, probably not do things as well as I could. And the players, I had a really great relationship with players, but there was a couple of coaches I was struggling with at the time, and he just came up to me and said, mate, I just need to give you a little stab in the belly. And that was, to me, wow, that's pretty powerful, because and so what grew from there was the concept of, if you're a player, players aren't happy about something, they'll go looking for a shoulder, and they'll find somebody that'll agree with them, or somebody that'll empathise or sympathise with them, and that can be unhealthy. So, like, I might be sitting with a player and he goes, oh, mate, Ben's just, he's out of control. He was carrying on like an idiot today. And I can go two ways. I can go, yeah, mate, but that's just Ben, like he does that to everyone. Or you can say, well, mate, let's go and chat to him now about it. Let's go and I'll come with you, and we'll just go and chat to him about it now. And it's like, you can be one of those too. You can be the guy that sits there and sympathises and empathises with him and let this sort of thing fester around in the background, or you can be quite polite and say, yeah, mate, that's you actually, yeah, but let's go and chat to him about it now, and then you can, and just get on. And I think that's important as well, to have that sort of people in your environment that are going to be like that. And we want to try and grow people, and so as a coaching group, part of as you say, the culture, it's a cliched line, but when you actually live it, it's very powerful in disagree and commit. It's a very powerful behaviour as a group of coaches. So if you can have a coaching group that disagree and commit, you're very lucky. And sometimes it's not luck because you build it. But if you can be in a coaching group where everyone disagrees and commits, so a player can't find a shoulder. Oh, mate, I don't like what we're doing here. I don't like the way we're counter-attacking. I think counter-attack doesn't work. And and if you're the defence coach, or the line-out coach, you might go, yeah, mate, I don't agree with it either. Or you can just go, oh, no, it's a good point. Let's go now and let's go and chat to the coach, see what he thinks. Let's go and, let's have a good chat to him about it and make your points there. And that's where it's going to be really valuable to the team. And that guy's going to go one of two ways, isn't he? He's going to go, oh, no, mate, it's all right, don't worry about it. But your coaching group hasn't been undermined by somebody allowing a player to not happy about something come in. Just grab him and say, let's go and talk to the coach now. Let's go and sit down with him. And it's a good point you raised. Let's chat about it. And I think if you can have that sort of environment, then you're probably on your way to getting some good growth.
Mate, I love it. And certainly having been around some great coaches, there's that ability to disagree and commit regardless of the tone. Some of those morning meetings and times, I imagine the All Blacks environment was this, it gets heated, and it's often said as robust discussions. And if you're a fly on the wall, you'd think, geez, these guys will never talk to each other ever again with the tone they're taking inside this meeting. But the moment that it goes, right, are we going to disagree and commit? Yep, bang. And then the best coaches in the world, I've noticed, as soon as they walk out that meeting room door, they're back to mates again. And it's not that they weren't. It was just that ability to be so brutally honest and stab people in the belly to their face is a common trait of some of the world's best coaches, right?
Yeah, well, the Melbourne Storm, for me, I've been lucky enough to be, close to that environment since 2007, 2008. And I've been in some meetings that they've had that have been like that, and you sort of sit there going, geez, I don't think I could be in any other room I've ever been in sport and have this conversation going on. And then they leave and they go out and they train the house down, and the respect they have for each other, because they understand in that meeting the truth has to get spoken and it's not personal. It's the truth. And then they leave the meeting, as you say, the coaches get on with it, and we go out and we move on, we move forward with it. And I think that's that's an indication of the successful programs where you do move on, you do go, and you're not carrying the grudge, and you're not going out there sooking about something that was said. You cop it, you move on, and that is a sign of a great environment. Those types of conversations that can be had, and people accept them for what they are. They're conversations about our performance, about you as a rugby player, because, mate, at the end of the day, rugby is what you do, not who you are. And so if we're going to maintain any sort of dignity out of this game, we've got to understand who we are, because rugby, and this is another thing that happens with young coaches, or especially young players, they think rugby defines them, so you can win a game and come off and be a great bloke, and you can lose a game and come off and be a shithead, which you're probably somewhere in between there as a normal person, and that's where you should be. No matter win, lose, you should come off and be that normal person. But you win and you're the best bloke in the world. You're charging around, you're shouting the bar, and you're having a great time. You lose, you don't talk to anyone, you don't talk to friends, you don't talk to family, and you justify it because, we got beaten, and that means something to me, well, mate, that was a couple of hours ago. It might be time just to chill and relax a bit. So I think I never get upset with people that are like that. I just try and help them understand, like, mate, it's not who you are. Let's
Love
get
it,
on.
mate. I love it. I heard a wonderful quote just the other day about that. As a team, no one should know whether we've won or lost by the way we behave after a game. And I just think that's a cool statement, because that goes back to you talking about your inward growth. We're going to work on consistency about how we hold ourselves. It doesn't matter what the outcome there is. We want to be living our values every day, regardless of how this game goes.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's, and it's good. I think, no, it's perfect. I'm certainly learning every day, and I'm just about to embark on a Northern Hemisphere tour, and I'll get challenged on there, and I'll learn again. And, hopefully the dark traits can stay in the team room when I leave and go down to the meeting room. But
I love it.
We're always working on it, mate. Always working.
Now, Mick, it's time. It's an hour, mate. I like to keep it to an hour, so just to value your time, mate. And I've got one last question, which I like to ask, and I'd love your opinion with all your experiences. Is there anything about culture that you agree with that you reckon your contemporaries or peers would disagree with?
Yeah, I guess that don't talk about it. I think there's a lot of people I hear, talk about, you got to talk, work, keep your culture at the forefront, do. I don't know. It's a hard one, mate. It's, because I don't know what my peers would really be in against what I think. But the one thing is we just continually, you just continually live it every day. I'm not sure I'd be at, it's a difficult question. I'm not sure I'd be at odds with my peers on it. I think everybody is the same. It's a powerful thing. I would never say culture's not important. So, I mean, I think all coaches would believe it is. Yeah, I think we just live it. We just live the values and standards and beliefs every day.
Adopt the Nike slogan.
Yeah, which is basically our James 1:22:25, Just do what you say, So do what you say. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that, especially if you've got a lot to say.
Well, there's a lesson right there, mate. Don't say too much. Say less, do more.
Yeah.
I love it. Mick Byrne, thank you very much for your time today, mate. If I may, I'd like to now just give you my 3 takeaways from what I got out of this conversation. Number 1, I just love the rephrasing of words. At the very start, you talked about getting rid of the word don't in your language, because the do is the doing word, and you talk about living every day and actions first and reinforcing the behaviours you want to see. And as a coaching point, getting rid of that one word can probably change your whole mindset of not just you as a coach, but everyone that follows on your advice. Reinforce the behaviours you want to see. Do is the doing word, not don't. I think that's a lovely reminder for all coaches. Number 2 is this concept of identifying your dark traits. You are super honest and open about your traits, things like sarcasm, closing off, trying to be perfect. And now every coach has these dark traits. And you talked about identifying them and not justifying them, just owning them, because everybody has them. It's normal, it's human to have these things. And I think the pressure of performance brings up these dark traits, and this is part of coaching. Coaching in itself is a pressure thing, and you feel it, and when that pressure comes, the dark traits come to the front. Own them, identify it, and never justify them. Embrace them and try build as you go in getting them better. Number 3 is the emotion is the greatest distraction of conversation. A quote that you said, and I loved it because it's so true. When you're dealing with people, particularly in a sport as passionate as rugby, is keep bringing people back to the thing you're talking about. And a couple of ways which I loved, which you mentioned on ways to do this, is to have that critical friend, someone you can rely on for honest feedback, to pull you up when you're getting out of line, to make those observations you might not be able to make yourself if emotion is getting carried away. We discussed in this conversation 3 little concepts to actually help with that, and one from Steve Hansen about maybe it's time for a coffee, and then doing it that way and relaxing it so it makes it easier to be honest and more neutral about your opinions. 2, the concept of stabbing someone in the belly, so just telling them how it is and being able to receive that. And 3, this concept of disagreeing and committing. Some of the best coaches in the world embrace this, and they're prepared to be honest, let the emotion go, have the conversation, and then commit to whatever the outcome is. And I think those are wonderful things to just keep bringing it back, that rugby is an emotional game. It's going to be there. So just embrace it. Come up with little ways that you can make sure it's not taking you away from the actual facts of what you're dealing with. Mick Byrne, what an absolute pleasure to get your insight around culture through all your incredible experiences throughout a lifetime of coaching.
Thanks very much. And just talking today just brings it all back to the top of mind, and the timing couldn't be better, brother, just to embark on this 3-week tour and to bring all that stuff back to top of mind after having a few weeks away recovering and regenerating. It's awesome timing to bring it all back to top of mind as I get in front of our batch of players and coaches for the next 4 weeks. So I appreciate the time, mate.